Can heaven be bought with gold? This is the story of a wealthy man who gave everything, but still felt empty. Inspired by the teachings of Baba Muhammad Yahya Khan, this Sufi parable follows a merchant whose journey to the divine leads him not to more wealth, but to total surrender. When giving isn't enough and status falls away, what remains? Before we go deep into this story, please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the Seeker's Digest channel, and press the bell icon so you never miss our upcoming wisdom stories. The city of Esfahan glittered like a jewel under the Persian sun, a vibrant tapestry of commerce and culture. At its heart lived a merchant named Omar. Not just any merchant, but the merchant. Rich beyond counting, his warehouses groaned with spices from the east and silks from the west. His ships, bearing his personal standard, sailed across oceans, their holds brimming with goods that would fetch fortunes in distant lands. His name, Omar ibn Yusuf, was not merely spoken. It was etched in intricate calligraphy on ledgers and whispered with reverence in the gilded palaces of kings and emperors. There wasn't a market from Damascus to Delhi that didn't know the sheer weight of his gold. Omar was not a cruel man. Far from it. He understood the divine injunction to charity and observed it meticulously. He had personally financed the construction of magnificent mosques, their domes touching the sky, their minarets calling the faithful to prayer. He had fed the poor, not just with meager handfuls, but with overflowing granaries of grain, ensuring no belly went hungry in his sphere of influence. He had sponsored pilgrims on their arduous journeys to the holy cities, providing them with provisions and protection. His acts of benevolence were legendary, and his name hung on marble plaques in public squares and charitable foundations, testament to his piety and generosity. Yet, despite all his outward displays of devotion and the endless stream of gratitude from those he helped, an unsettling emptiness persisted within him. As the years wore on and the dark strands of his beard turned to streaks of gray, something began to gnaw at the very edges of his immense wealth. It started as a subtle whisper, a fleeting doubt, a shadow of fear. Then it grew into a relentless hunger, an insatiable craving for something more, something definitive. Finally, it became an obsession. Have I bought my place in heaven yet? He would ask himself, his voice a low rumble in the silent chamber, as he meticulously counted gleaming gold coins by candlelight. The metallic clink was the only sound echoing his restless thoughts. Have I paid enough? The question would torment him through the long nights, despite the mountains of gold that surrounded him. So he gave more. He built a vast academy, a beacon of learning, a school for scholars where knowledge flowed as freely as water. He purchased entire villages, not for profit, but to free them from the burden of tax, earning the heartfelt blessings of generations. He filled libraries with ancient manuscripts and new treatises, and stocked countless kitchens with mountains of rice and other staples. His philanthropy knew no bounds, reaching further and wider than any merchant before him. And still, the hollow ache, the persistent emptiness, remained. It was a void that no amount of gold, no marble plaque, no whispered prayer of gratitude could fill. One night, the gnawing emptiness manifested itself in a vivid, unsettling dream. He found himself standing at the majestic, pearl-inlaid gates of paradise. Behind him stretched an endless caravan of camels laden not with spices or silks, but with massive, bulging bags, each filled to the brim with his countless good deeds, quantified in gleaming gold. Omar, confident, approached the radiant gatekeeper, presenting his vast offerings. But the gatekeeper, with eyes as deep as the cosmos, simply looked at him and said, his voice a gentle, yet firm echo, "What is this? We do not take payment here." He awoke trembling, the words resounding in his mind. The dream was not a mere figment of sleep. It was a revelation, a shattering of his long-held assumptions. The next morning, a sense of urgency propelled him. He gathered his most trusted advisors, men who had navigated treacherous seas and intricate markets on his behalf. "Find me someone," he ordered, his voice devoid of its usual merchant's authority, replaced instead by a raw plea. "Someone who knows the real path. Someone who has seen heaven with their own eyes." His men, accustomed to fulfilling his every command, searched for weeks. They traversed ancient trade routes, consulted wise scholars, and sought out reclusive hermits. Finally, they returned with a hushed report of a dervish, a barefoot mystic whose only possessions were the clothes on his back and a clay bowl for alms. He lived under a solitary fig tree by the banks of a murmuring river, and was known to speak only when absolutely necessary, his words imbued with profound truth. Driven by a desperate hope, Omar embarked on the journey himself. He arrived at the fig tree not empty-handed, but with the very currency he believed held power: lavish gifts. There were rolls of finest silk robes, their colors shimmering like jewels, vials of exotic perfumes distilled from rare blossoms, even a scattering of dazzling jewels that would make a king envious. He laid them at the feet of the dervish, who sat in serene contemplation. But to Omar's astonishment, the dervish didn't even look at them. His gaze remained fixed on the flowing river, as if the gifts were merely stones on the bank. "I've come to learn," said the merchant, swallowing his pride, his voice a little unsteady. "To buy the truth if you'll sell it." The dervish slowly turned his head, his eyes, deep and knowing, met Omar's. A gentle, knowing smile touched his lips. "You cannot buy what you already own," he replied, his voice like the rustling leaves of the fig tree. The merchant frowned, confusion clouding his features. "I don't understand." "You will," said the dervish, his gaze unwavering. "But first, leave everything here: gold, name, purpose. Come back tomorrow with only your hunger." Omar left, profoundly disturbed. The dervish's words echoed in his mind, stripping him bare of his carefully constructed identity. He did not sleep that night, wrestling with the profound challenge. Could he truly abandon all that defined him? The next day, a transformed Omar returned. He came alone. No retinue of servants, no shimmering silk robes, only the simple, worn clothes he had donned that morning. He sat humbly beside the dervish, feeling a lightness he hadn't experienced in decades. "I have come with only questions," he confessed, his voice quiet, sincere. The dervish nodded. "Then you are ready to begin," he affirmed, a hint of warmth in his eyes. For what felt like an eternity, they sat together, sometimes in profound silence, broken only by the murmur of the river. Other times, the dervish would weave ancient stories, parables whispered through generations about seekers and sages, about the nature of the divine. Omar, the shrewd businessman who always had an answer, listened more than he spoke. The fine fabrics of his past were replaced by the dust of the earth clinging to his simple clothes. His once pampered fingers, accustomed to counting gold, learned instead to break bread with passing laborers, sharing their meager meals. He washed his face in the cool, clear water of the river, shedding the residues of his former life. One morning the dervish, breaking a long silence, said, "Today we go to the valley." They walked in companionable silence, traversing the gentle hills until they reached a narrow, winding path. The air grew cooler, the sunlight softened, and at the end of the path, a dark, inviting maw opened into the earth, a cave. "Go inside," the dervish said, his voice quiet but firm. Omar hesitated, a flicker of his old fear returning. "What's in there?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Your answer," the dervish replied simply. Taking a deep breath, Omar stepped into the darkness. The air inside was cold, damp, and smelled of ancient earth. He walked steadily, deeper and deeper, until he could no longer discern the faintest sliver of light behind him, and then nothing. Absolute silence. No mystical vision, no booming voice from the heavens, just emptiness. Profound, suffocating emptiness. He sat, time lost all meaning. Hours passed, or perhaps days. At first, the old Omar resurfaced. He demanded signs from the unseen, desperate for a tangible proof of his quest. Then he begged, his voice raw with despair, pleading for guidance. Then, as the weight of his futility pressed down, he wept, tears mingling with the dampness of the cave walls. And then, in the deepest throes of his despair, a profound shift occurred. Finally, he let go. He let go of his name, the identity that had defined him for so long. He let go of his immense wealth, the very foundation of his worldly power. He let go of his certainty, his need to control, to understand, to demand. He became utterly empty. In that complete, terrifying emptiness he felt it. Not a voice, no audible command, but an undeniable presence. Not a promise of future rewards, but an immediate, profound peace that filled the void where his desires once raged. It was the peace that passes all understanding, the stillness at the heart of existence. When he emerged, blinking into the soft light of the valley, the dervish was waiting, a faint, compassionate smile on his lips. Omar, tears still streaking his dust-streaked face, fell to his knees. "I have nothing," he whispered, his voice thin, yet imbued with a newfound freedom. The dervish gently placed a hand on his head, a gesture of profound acceptance. "Exactly," he said, his voice soft as a breeze. "And now you can receive." The transformed Omar returned home, but not to his former life of extravagant wealth. His journey had fundamentally altered his perception of worth. He systematically gave away his vast estates. He closed his numerous accounts in the banks of Esfahan and beyond. He chose to live simply in a small, unadorned dwelling, embracing a life of quiet contentment. When people, still incredulous, asked him why, he would simply say, his eyes shining with an inner light, "Heaven isn't bought, it's remembered. It's not a transaction, it's a surrender." And so, the man who once meticulously measured worth in gleaming gold now measured it in profound silence. He no longer feared death, for he had embraced a form of death in the cave and found life. He feared only forgetting who he truly was, the essence unveiled in emptiness. He was no longer known as Omar ibn Yusuf, the richest merchant in the land. He was simply called the man who once tried to buy heaven and found it when he gave himself away. In time, people from distant cities, not traders seeking profits, but genuine seekers yearning for truth, came to sit with him. They asked him profound questions about success, about piety, about faith. He rarely answered with words, for the deepest truths often elude language. Instead, he would simply point. He would point to the thriving garden he now lovingly tended, its vibrant life a testament to simple care. Or to the coarse loaf of bread he would break and share with the poor, symbolizing connection and humility. Or to the trusting bird resting calmly on the edge of his clay bowl, a living embodiment of peace. One traveler, a young man with eager eyes and a heavy heart, asked, "How did you do it? How did you find peace?" The man, now truly an elder of wisdom, smiled, his gaze distant, stirring the glowing ashes of a dying fire. "By unlearning everything I thought I needed," he said, his voice carrying the weight of deep experience. Another, perhaps still clinging to worldly notions, pressed him. "But you were a great man!" "You had everything." He laughed, a gentle, resonant sound that carried no bitterness. "I had nothing that could not be taken. Now I have nothing that can be taken," he replied, his words echoing the profound security of true surrender. His words, though rarely spoken aloud, spread like fertile seeds across the lands, not loud or forced, but deeply impactful, finding root in receptive hearts. A young seeker, inspired by his encounter, meticulously wrote in his journal, "Ain't carried no scripture, wore no crown, and yet my heart bowed when he spoke. He taught me that God is not impressed with wealth or noise, but with the one who returns empty and stays." In the end, no grand shrine was built in his honor, no monumental book bore his name, but people remembered, and in quiet courtyards, under the vast canopy of ancient trees and the silent gaze of countless stars, stories continued to be told of a man who once tried to buy heaven and found instead the open door inside himself. His legacy lived not in stone or gold, but in the whispered truths that inspired others to embark on their own journeys of surrender,